Hi guys, welcome to another BigLipz podcast. My name is Catherine Maurice. Joined with me is my good friend Sam Macaulay Blair.
Yeah.
Basically, as always, we are two kind of former current film students, and we've just kind of created this podcast so that we've got a place to vent our super interesting, insightful, and original ideas about films. Um, so this is episode 16, and we're doing this one a little bit differently. So we're kind of recording it on two separate occasions. So this is part one. And basically, the reason we're doing this is because we're going to be talking about kind of like the nostalgia and childhood movies. So maybe movies that you watched all the time when you were young that you haven't seen since, or movies that particularly scared you or that you were weirdly obsessed with for some reason. So we're going to be looking at three each, and kind of going. This part will be kind of our expectations of the movies. We've not seen our own movies yet. We've not rewatched them. So this is basically just like a kind of expectation of what we think it's going to be. So, Sam, your choices were very interesting. Movies I've never heard of, which I think is always the case with childhood movies as well. Which
Yeah.
is which I think will be part of the fun of this podcast. So, Sam, if you want to fire away with your first choice, just kind of telling what you kind of remember, what maybe why you've chosen it, and what you think, how you think the movie's going to be rewatching it as an adult.
Cool. So my first choice, I actually feel quite confident in it being like I have like high hopes for it being like the one that it will stand up to this rewatch, and I'll actually get like a lot from. It's a movie called Cinema Paradiso, and it is, I think, Spanish. Again, I've not seen the movie. I've seen the movie once when I was a kid. My mum, I think, as I mentioned before in other podcasts, had absolute like fanatic for foreign films. So naturally, I was exposed to a few as a kid, and this was one that I think I remember more her talking about my reaction to it rather than my actual reaction to it. I think she said that I absolutely loved it. One of the only things that I remember, I mean, well, funnily enough, I remember it's about cinema. I have a very vivid memory of there being like there's quite a lot of movies that I saw I think as a kid, but I remember this being one of them that has like there's a scene where there's a fire, and I just remember having an absolute like terrifying like petrifying fear of fires when I was a kid. Like I used to be like so paranoid that my house was going to catch fire. I was going to be stuck in like a house fire. Like
That's
genuinely,
horrifying.
I remember like I remember at night, like I remember before I go to bed going around just like turning off like every electrical appliance in the house because I was like so paranoid that there was going to be like a house fire. So I think this movie had like a big I do remember the like the fire scenes having like a very big impact on me just because like that's like no, that's the one thing that I'm really scared of. um, so yeah, I'm interested in revisiting this one. And I again going in so blind. I think there's an old man and a little boy in it. Again, I feel like there's like every chance I'll actually have a really good time with this. And again, with my newfound appreciation for world cinema and sort of foreign movies, I think like I'll get a lot out of it. So I've
Yeah.
avoided this one long enough. Time to me to go back.
No, I'm excited. I haven't seen this one yet either, so I'm excited to see it. I think this will be such a funny like because their movie's so like ingrained in our childhood. It'll be such a funny way to like almost get to know each other more. To be like, that's a
Yeah.
really weird movie, by the way. um, so yeah, going. My first choice is the Disney movie The Black Cauldron, and the reason I chose this is because I vividly remember being terrified of it as a child, like properly terrified, but in a weird kind of like morbid way. I would always like I remember it being a child and arguing with my mum to put it on because she would always, rightly so, be like, "You don't like it, you're scared of it," and I'd be like, "No, no, I won't. I'll watch it," and then I would put it on, and then I would hide behind the TV, and I don't know why I wasted everyone's time by putting it on,
Wow.
but but yeah, so what I remember is because old classic Disney movies especially are pretty scary. There's scenes that are really like disturbing, but I remember this whole movie being like that. Um, the thing I remember really vividly being scary is the villain. He's what really scared me. And he was like, I remember him being super tall and he had this like skull head, but there was like horns coming out it. Um, and there was obviously the cauldron, and I'm sure at one point he's like creating this army, and they're like all coming out of the cauldron, and he's been really evil and scary. So I'm excited to see whether I still find it scary, and whether maybe I find it scary because of the memories, or whether it's actually scary. Because like you can rewatch, say like Sleeping Beauty, and the bit when she's about to prick her finger, it's a scary scene, even as an adult. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see if that's the same. I also want to talk, sorry, about this horrible. I remember this minging little thing. I don't know what it was. It was like a little rodent-y thing, but it looked like an old man, and his name was, I wrote it down. His name was Gurgi, and I remember him making me feel sick at the time. So I'm excited to see whether that was warranted or whether I was just a child being an idiot.
Fair. Yeah, this is also one that I've like not seen, but I have heard of the Black Cauldron. It is one that like, I think I've actually had like a friend tell me, that they watched it recently or maybe rewatched it recently and said that it's actually like I think I've heard that it's a pretty underrated Disney flick.
Yeah.
So it has actually been one that like for a while I've kind of thought I want to check that out just because I wanted, yeah, I'm curious to see what it's about. And I get what you mean about like that I have that kind of like reaction with some of my own where I'm like, okay, like there's like almost like these haunted images and stuff. Are these things even scary? Is there actually going to be fear
Yeah.
there? Is there going to be like is like you say, is there going to be residual fear? Like am I going to watch it and I'm still kind of freaked out by it, but only because it's freaked me out then and it's freaking me out now,
Yeah.
or is it genuinely like scary in its own right? So yeah, this will be interesting, I think, to actually like discuss both of our like all of our films and see like I'll be interested to see if there's points of the Black Cauldron that I find spooky.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good point.
Um,
So yeah,
so
what's your second movie? Fire away.
my second film is another foreign movie. This one French, and it's called the. It's animated though, so it's not live action. This one, and it's called The Triplets of Belleville. Probably not how you pronounce it at all, but I didn't even remember that was the name of the movie. To be honest, I had to look it
Love it.
up. The only thing I could remember there's like a very like distinct song that's sung by I think three women throughout the movie. I remember there is one of the main characters I believe is like a cyclist and he just has these like ridiculously like obviously it's just like the style of the animation but he has these like really like skinny frame but then these like ridiculously muscular legs and there's just like a lot of like really weird sort of like imagery in this film. Again, I don't remember too much of it but I do remember. I think it's a weird one. Like I think I had like again, I avoided like foreign films for a while after like my mum's obsession with them, and I think like
Fair.
I can't quite place why that is. These movies might have played a part in it. I'd be curious to see,
Yeah.
and I think if they have, I think there might be because I think watching foreign films now, there's you like really appreciate the sense that like sort of slice of culture that you get and the sort of like alienness almost of like when you're watching something that is like spoken in a different tongue with like just yeah like different customs and everything and even just like different
Mm-hmm.
social interactions and whatnot. I think it does kind of make something more interesting. You do feel like you're getting something different. Whereas I don't know like as a kid, I don't know if I was just kind of like um I didn't really need that. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't so I was still just being like blown away by movies in general that I didn't really need that extra layer and I think maybe that was just like a slight hindrance to them. Maybe that like put me
Mm-hmm.
off because I was just like okay these are a bit too weird so that they've gone in a very different way than I kind of needed them to. I don't know if it was maybe because I'd never really been on holiday, I'd never been abroad anywhere when I was younger, so I don't know if it was like I had no frame of reference for like these cultures and these
Yeah.
languages. So again, they were just like kind of mystifying and again like this movie in particular, I just think has its own sort of like weird sort of style. And again, I'm very curious to see how I react to it. Because yeah, I think I really liked it as a kid. But I again like when I like think about it, the impression I get is like almost like kind of like oh I don't really know if I want to go near that,
Yeah.
just because I feel like there is like a slight lingering fear from that film. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know what of like I don't have anything in particular to place it on. So I'm kind of curious to take a dive and find out
Yeah.
what.
I think that's an interesting one because I haven't at your request, I haven't looked up really anything about the movie. I had just seen the kind of movie poster, and the
Yeah.
animation does look kind of weird. And like, I think obviously if we grew up watching like Disney movies or things like that, it's such a very specific type of animation, and if that's what we were used to, and then there's suddenly this kind of like weirdly animated thing in a foreign language, yeah, it's going to be even
I
weirder,
think
isn't it?
I think as well. There's also like a slight element of realism. Not that there's like hyper realism, obviously, with it being animation and everything, but I think it is quite grounded. I think it is like sort of grounded in reality in a sense, and I think there's also a kind of like stark bleakness to it. I think just with that realism, that again makes it a bit more adult. Not again, I don't think it was like a particular adult film. Maybe it is. But I think that also might have like again you're used to like animations, I guess like you say, being like Disney and being quite fantastical and all like hopeful and optimism.
Yeah.
Whereas this I think might have been a bit more like
The French are like, we're not having any of that.
yeah, you would cry at this movie.
Love it. So my second movie was a Disney movie, funnily enough, not animated though. And that is the movie Benji the Hunted. And this is such a funny one because I brought it up to my pal and she was like, God, you're always talking about that movie. And I honestly haven't seen it since I was a proper like young child. This was one of the ones I think my gran had recorded it off the TV, like, and we used to just watch it on video at her house. And I just, even when I think about it, it just like is one of those nice movies where it just warms my heart thinking about it. Again, I don't know whether that's just like memories of being young and just being at your gran's house, which is always fun, um, or whether the movie was actually just like one of those movies where it's just a nice movie. From my memory, I remember it obviously being about dog Benji, and he's lost in like the jungle or the forest or something. I can't remember whether he's lost actually, but he's in the forest or the jungle. And there's what I think are like three abandoned, are they like cheetah cubs, some kind of big cat cub. Anyway, and I remember the whole movie is he takes it upon himself and he's like taking care of them until their mum comes home, kind of thing. And I think it's a really funny one because I don't remember it having much of a plot out with that. I do remember they're kind of, I don't know whether I'm mixing this up with a different movie though, but in my memory, there's like a kind of mountain lion cougar type villain that's I'm sure tried like getting about the cubs, and Benji has to fight him off. Benji, a small dog, has to fight off like this mountain lion or whatever it is in my memory, and I'm really excited to see whether I'm completely misremembering because I can visualize really specific scenes or shots where there's like the three little cubs in their little like den thing almost, and then Benji's just kind of keeping watch. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to see this one because I really want that like nice wholesome feeling again. But I'm also a little bit nervous that it like ruins it, and then that's my entire childhood again. So the pressure's on for this one.
Yeah, fair. I've already watched this one, so I'm looking forward to talking about it. And it's
Yeah.
interesting knowing what happens in it, knowing all the narrative like
My
twists and turns that it
synopsis.
takes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I'm excited to hear your like second impressions of it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting hearing like interesting having seen it, hearing like your fragmented sort of thoughts and memories of it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm
Um, Me too. So my last pick, my last film, is a movie from the 50s, which you pointed out. I have no idea when it was from. It's from my childhood.
Yeah.
That's all I know. It was on TV at one point, and I watched it a bunch. I do know I had a videotape of this one, and I think it was like again like you're saying like my mom recorded it off the telly and. But I think the initial recording she had of it didn't have the beginning of the movie, so I think just for ages, like I just never seen the opening of the film. And this is probably, if I'm not mistaken, this is the weirdest one. This is
Ooh.
yeah, this movie is just outright bonkers from what I remember. And I actually think I remember the most about this one out of any of them, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I do remember absolutely loving this movie. From what I remember, it's about a boy who is trying to learn how to play piano. I think I can actually remember the end of the movie, or at least like the idea of what the end of it is, and I'm not going to say that just because I'd hate to ruin it for you. And I remember just again like some weird imagery from the film. I remember there just being like these really bizarre like sort of sets and costuming, and I remember just concepts, and I remember
Is it live
I'm pretty sure.
action? Sorry.
Yes, it's live
Yeah.
action. I know, a live action sandwich with the animation in between. But yeah, this one goes for the more outlandish stuff. I'm pretty sure there's like two old men with like really long beards that are like tied together, and they like cut around on roller skates. Um, I'm pretty sure there's like a fight scene with jazz hands in the movie. Um,
Wow.
yeah, no,
That's what's missing from cinema nowadays. I'm just gonna say.
it really is going to be like a deep dive into both the past and my past. So um, I am interested to revisit this one, and again also a little bit terrified, and very interested, I think, to see what your thoughts on it are as well.
Yeah. Yes. I'm excited to see this. I feel like people always have that weird, like, really old movie that they were obsessed with as a child. And then you grow up and you're like, have you not seen that? And you're like, I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's such a niche film.
Yeah. So no, that'll be exciting. I think my last one, I've gone the opposite sandwich to you. I've gone an animation sandwich with live action in the middle. But so my last one is this movie called Water Babies. And this is another one that my gran had recorded off the telly. And the reason I was going to pick another movie, which hopefully we'll talk about in a different podcast, but this movie I chose because I distinctly remember both my gran and my mum really disliking the movie, and I loved it. And I'm really intrigued to see whether they were correct, whether it's a terrible movie, and I was just a child, or whether there'll be that wee bit of nostalgia that helps me cling on to be like, oh no, actually it was all right. So I'm excited to see that. This is the one I probably have the least memory of, but I do remember there was a little boy and he had this weird haircut. I remember his haircut distinctly because I remember because he goes through it's in like this like bottom of a garden kind of thing in my memory, and he finds like this kind of hole or something, and he climbs in or whatever, and there's like I remember because it's sorry, I lied, it's live action too, animation. And when he goes through this little tunnel thing, that's when it turns into animation, and that's when he meets like the water babies or whatever. But I can't remember anything about it. I can't remember why. I think he keeps going back, but I can't remember why or what happens or even anything other than this boy and his haircut in that one specific scene where it goes from live action to animation. So yeah, that's like all I can remember of it, so I'm really excited, and I'm sure you had an amazing time watching it.
I've seen the first half of it, the first half hour, sorry, of it. So the first like third. Yeah. Again, I know more about the movie than you do right now. It is certainly a haircut.
Do you know why I remember the haircut? Because it perfectly transitions from the live action to the animation, and he's got the same horrendous haircut. I remember that distinctly.
Which one do you think they drew it first, or do you think they maybe had a better haircut and they started drawing it and they messed it up and they're like, well, we're gonna have to cut your hair.
Yeah,
like
this
now.
they took the little animation to the hairdresser and were like, we need this, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we've drawn this. Our animators just went ahead and drew this, so you're gonna have to cut them to look like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think though. I think it came out in like, was it the 70s? I think I saw.
I think it's 78. Yeah.
Which might explain the hairdo, but it doesn't excuse it. But yeah, no, I think this will be obviously because we haven't seen them now. I think going back will be hilarious, and I think the next installment, obviously you'll just watch it as one podcast, but our next installment will be very fun, I think.
Yeah. Which of them do you think you're going to enjoy the most out of yours?
I'm hoping it's Benji.
You're hoping it's Benji?
If I'm honest. I'm hoping it's Benji.
Okay.
But I feel like there's too much like ingrained fear for me to enjoy Black Cauldron. Like I feel like I'm not going to enjoy it. I feel like I am going to be scared.
Okay. So you think you enjoy the Black Cauldron the least and enjoy Benji the most?
Potentially, yeah. I think I'll maybe have a better appreciation for the Black Cauldron, but I will still. I do think I will still think it's scary. Um, but yeah. What about you? What are your thoughts? What are your predictions?
I think I'll enjoy Cinema Paradiso the most. As for I don't know, like I really don't. I'm really curious what my reaction to Triplets is going to be because I feel like it could go either way. Like I feel like I could watch it and I could be like that was a terrific movie. Like I'm really glad that I've rewatched this now, older, and actually appreciated it. Or I could, or I could just get hit with all these images and be like, no, I can't go back. And
That's
have
when
a
like your
terrible
fear
time
of
watching it.
your fear of fire will come back.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, no, all three movies are just like this nightmare for me. Um, but and 5,000 Fingers is an interesting one because, like I said, I remember the most about it. I feel like it's the most colourful and innocent, I guess, of the movies, maybe in its own way. So I feel like, and maybe campy. So I feel like I could just have a lot of fun with it. But then again, I might watch it and I'm like, man, this movie's really lame.
Yeah, that's
Or it
fair.
just looks really tacky or whatever. Like I don't know. So I'm gonna say cinema at the top and I'll say Triplets at the bottom because I think there's enough nostalgia from 5,000 that it's gonna
For it
jump
to
ahead
carry
of
it through.
Triplets, and I think enough fear in Triplets, even though unfounded, potentially, enough fear of Triplets that it's going to be at the bottom, but we'll see.
No, and yeah, I'm interested. So yeah, on that note, we will be back. See
Yeah,
ya. For
the
now,
whistle.
we're back. This is part 2 of the podcast which you're already watching. So we'll just dive right in. Basically, at this point, we've both watched our own movies again and each other's movies. So yeah, we'll jump right in. And I think the first one we're going to talk about is Sam's choice of Cinema Paradiso. So Sam, if you want to go first, tell us what your thoughts were, if they were different, if it felt different watching it, if you thought it was a weird choice for a child.
I mean, the first part of the movie obviously like stars a child, so
Fair.
it has that going for it. There was fire. I remembered the fire. And it was to be fair, the fire seems heavy.
Yeah.
The movie sort of pulls no punches at that point, and it kind of comes like there's a lot of foreshadowing. So obviously there's a lot of foreshadowing for the fact that there's going to be a fire in it. With obviously him mentioning the celluloid being really flammable and then actually like catching fire in the house and stuff like that, and yeah, but it's still just like so out of left field when they're having a really sweet moment of like projecting the movie onto the square and then the thing just basically explodes.
And poor Alfredo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and they do like, I mean, they did a really good job of the whole fake out and stuff, and the time jump really surprised me. I honestly was pretty shocked at how little of the movie I kind of remembered. It really was just sort of the bits where he was a kid that I had like the vaguest of memories of, and obviously the fact that there was a fire. But I really enjoyed it. Like I actually had a really good time watching the movie. I thought the dynamic was really sort of cute, and it's now it's now like a trope for movies to kind of like be not I guess meta but like praise movies. It's something that we have seen. I think like was it Clerks or something. I've never seen Clerks, but I'm pretty sure
I've never
like,
seen it, yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah, I think they like talk about Star Wars and stuff like that in it, and that was like I think at the time was still quite like a new thing for like movies to really be talking about other movies and sort of like lauding them in the way that like sort of we do and fans do and stuff like that. But I think that I really liked about Cinema Paradiso was it's obviously got like so much love for cinema and for movies.
Yeah.
But it does it the way that it sort of sprinkled in, it was really like well done. It wasn't like the movie wasn't leaning on that. It wasn't leaning on like I recently saw Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds, which I enjoyed well enough. But the movie it does have like a number of references, and the moment where there's like references, it's like the moment is about that reference basically, and you're supposed to like be cheering and going, "Whoa, I love that movie," and now they're like referencing it.
Kind of like I felt like that watching Ready Player One. It was very more like oh look, remember this movie, as opposed to remember movies and how they make you feel and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I really appreciated the fact that it was like ahead of all these movies doing that, but doing it better.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, no, honestly, all in, like, I absolutely loved the movie. I quite I appreciated how sort of like it felt like it sort of walked the line between like being a movie and also being quite like real in a lot of ways. Obviously, like there are sort of consequences. You don't have like happy sort of like everything's not sort of like nicely tied up, and he doesn't end up like with the sort of woman that he was in love with. That, you know, there is sort of like elements of tragedy, and there are sort of like life lessons and sort of like things deliberately left like unchecked and unanswered. And yeah, like I just all round I thought it was like an absolutely terrific movie. But yeah, it was weird because the first part of it I was like, yeah, it was the vaguest of like vague recollections. Until I got to the fire scene where I was like, oh, here we go. And then I was genuinely surprised when there was like a time jump, and I was like, this is weird because I've seen this movie. What were your thoughts?
I actually really enjoyed it. I think it was funny because for some reason I went into it and I was like, I'm not going to enjoy this, and I couldn't even tell you why. But the more I was watching it, the more I enjoyed it, and it did give me that nice kind of like, after I'd watched it, I had like a nice like, yeah, movies are great, aren't they? Like that kind of feeling, which was, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a funny, like, bizarre movie to have watched as a child. Especially, I think the funny part is that it's not even in English, and
Yeah.
it was a fairly long movie. The cut I watched was like, I think 2 hours long or something. And I don't know if as a child I could have sat through that, but I think it's funny as well that it's all about like cinema and the love of cinema, and then you turn out to be a film student.
Yeah, my indoctrination.
Yeah, exactly. Just start young.
I know. I never actually thought about that. That is quite funny. I like, to be honest, I can't even remember like the context of me watching. Like I think it literally was just something that I seen the one time, and then I think my mum just sort of referenced it a lot. So because I just remember it being like discussed a lot, and I remember having like a vivid sort of recollection of the fire, being terrified of that. But I don't know if it was maybe just on TV, and my mum wanted to watch it, so she was like, well, we're both watching it, you're a child. Like,
yes,
we're watching what
I'm
want
choosing
to watch.
what's on the telly.
Exactly. So I don't really remember the context, but I have a feeling it might have been something like that. Yeah, I do get what you mean about it being like a bit of a bizarre film for a kid, but I don't think it was like picked out for me for that reason. I think it just just happened. I think I just kind of like, I think it's more maybe my mum was like, oh, there's a child in this. That's like an acceptable movie to watch with a child.
Yeah, and I wonder if she was like, oh, it's in Italian, so he wouldn't even really understand what's going on if it's bad.
She loves foreign films, so I think she was probably just like, yeah, like you will also love foreign films.
Yeah. I wonder if that's what's tainted you though, because you haven't seen a huge amount of foreign films by your own admission. So I wonder if you're like, you had your fill when you were young.
I think genuinely it was. I think I mean, we'll talk a bit more about foreign films because there's another one on this list. But I think there genuinely was like an impact from that, and it kind of put me off the foreign films, and also being a kid and just not really bothering with reading and stuff like that. Was also a bit of a detractor. But yeah, I think maybe cinema parodies to an extent with The Fire. Probably didn't help anything, but yeah, these films probably did put me off, which is, I guess, in some ways is a shame, but then in other ways it's like, well, it's lovely to get to sort of discover them now, and to get to rediscover that movie was a genuine treat. So yeah, I had a very good time.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just while we're on it, actually, it's worth mentioning. I was also really impressed at the sort of emotional punch at the end, which I just didn't see the whole like obviously compilation that he edits together for him is so like, I mean, it's set up so beautifully so that you completely understand exactly what it is and the sort of meaning of it, and it's so, because even when I was watching the scene, I was like, I couldn't even really put into words why this is as emotional as it is, because like it almost feels like you shouldn't be feeling the way you're feeling while watching this, but the movie, there's something about it that just works so perfectly, and it's such like a perfect expression of emotion while also like, I guess, like in sort of tandem, like running with like that sort of theme of like a love of cinema, and like a total like praise of cinema moments while also being so about the movie and the characters that I was just kind of like, I can't believe can't believe that someone thought of this and put it into a film and it worked as well as it did. So yeah, sorry, I wanted to mention that before we.
That's true. No, very good point. Yeah, thank you for that. So on a very different vein, the first movie that I watched, or rewatched, sorry, from my childhood, was obviously The Black Cauldron. And I think it was funny because I still, watching it even as an adult, I can still, it's still a scary film. Like, I can see why I was terrified as a child. Yeah, because it was, even the premise is kind of scary. Like, he wants the cauldron so that he can bring all these people back from the dead. That's pretty horrifying, like, as a child.
It's not very wholesome.
It's not very wholesome. It's not very Disney, is it? I mean, Disney has its dark moments, but this whole movie was dark. Although, in fairness, as I was watching it, I do have to admit that I've really changed my tune about poor Gurgi, because he was a sweetheart. And I can only apologise for slagging him relentlessly in the first part.
Gurgi, if you're watching this.
So, Gurgi, if you're out there, sorry.
Amazing.
But yeah, I think it was funny as well because I wrote this down actually because I thought it was so funny. I had absolutely no memory of a magical pig. Gun to my head, I would not have been able to tell you.
The thrust of the plot.
Exactly. Without the magical pig, there would be no Black Cauldron movie.
Exactly.
I had no memory of the witches either, who are another pretty integral part, and then the weird group of fairies. No memory of them. All I had memory of, I didn't even remember the old man. It was just.
What was it? Flitter.
Yeah, it was just like Taryn, the princess whose name I can't remember, and Gurgi. That was all I had in my memory, and the Horned King.
I mean, the Horned King's pretty memorable, to be fair. And
I think I read the Horned King. I think it was the Horned King was John Hurt.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I didn't notice that as well. I didn't notice that until afterwards, and I was reading up on it, and I was like, "Oh my god, I completely missed that."
What a weird choice. But yeah, I think looking back, I thought it was funny because I actually found the movie as a whole quite boring, which was weird because there was a lot going on, but it felt very. I think it was based on like a series of books, and they had just mashed whatever they wanted from the books, and it definitely felt like that in the movie. Like they didn't quite know where they were going, and they were like, but we want witches, but we also want fairies. We'll just mash everything together and hope it for the best, but it just didn't. It felt pretty boring. I think the scares were about the only thing going for it, to be honest. And Gurgi, of course.
Vive la Gurgi. Yeah, I would actually agree. I think I'd said before that I was quite looking forward to going into the Black Cauldron because I'd just sort of heard good things. I think I'd heard it was a bit of an outlier in Disney movies, and I was very much intrigued. It was something that I'd been sort of intending to watch for a while. And obviously like afterwards reading up that like you said, there was like a 5 or so books that they just like mashed into this one animated movie. And the weird thing about it was it felt, as much as there was a lot of like elements that just kind of appeared and disappeared, but at the same time also felt kind of weirdly, like I guess you said, sort of aimless and kind of empty. Like it didn't really feel like a lot of time. Yeah, it was just kind of like surely there should be a bit more going on, like a bit more. I guess there was like no sort of like development of the world. There was no real development of the characters. I think like Gurgi has like an arc, doesn't he? He's like he really is like the best. Also, like on Gurgi, he was such like, I was really surprised at how much of like a precursor he seemed to be of like Gollum and Dobby. He just seemed like a mix of those two characters.
That's such a good point.
Which was just like really, really bizarre. But yeah, he had like a proper solid arc, which he was again like surprisingly like strong. Like I was very much sad when he gets so much abuse as well through the movie. Like he really gets abuse on this podcast, abuse in the animated world that he lives. But
Gurgi. He sacrificed himself for all of us.
I know exactly. He properly did as well. Like he went from like outright cowards to like I'm gonna jump down on this sword.
Yeah, like coward and thief to hero that we're all needing but didn't know that we needed.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you for bringing Gurgi into both of our lives.
No worries. I think another thing, just quickly, kind of going off what you were talking about them not expanding like the universe. I feel like they did such a poor job of even telling you where this place was, that there wasn't
Yeah.
any kind of threat. Like, oh, so what? He's brought the army back from the dead. Where are they gonna go? It wasn't like we saw a town that they were headed towards.
Yeah.
Even just like a landscape of a town would have made it a bit more like, oh, there must be people there. That's where the dead people are going. But no, they were just crossing a drawbridge. Like there was,
Yeah.
it didn't feel like there was any threat.
That was yeah, and even the way that the movie kind of there was something weird about the way that it was sort of presented as well, where it felt like obviously there's so much he's spending so much time trying to like get this cauldron and raise this army, and then it feels like that should be a payoff in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there should be like a big dramatic moment, and it kind of when I was watching it, kind of felt like okay, that wasn't. So is the movie still building to like a more dramatic moment, and then obviously you see the skeletons marching and stuff, and it was just like this should feel a bit more like high. I guess that like you said, that's probably what's missing is there's no threat, there's nothing that they're like heading towards. Yeah, you're like it should feel more high stakes than it does. It does feel really sort of false and empty. It did look good. It did look good though because they sort of pioneered some. They were trying some new sort of technology with it, weren't they? Where they were.
Yeah, I saw that like with the flames and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you can kind of see it where like they sort of use like a bit of like real effects mixed in with like, or maybe like 3D effects mixed in with like 2D animation. Apparently, and one of their original ideas, they wanted to actually have like projectors in cinemas, and they were going to like project the sort of. Did you see it in cinema?
No, I just had
No,
we had it
okay.
on video.
Well, that would have probably traumatized you then if they actually did manage to do that. Apologies. But yeah, apparently they wanted to actually have the projectors and like do a holographic sequence for that, which
Wow.
was again like I sort of appreciate their ambition, but yeah, kind of there's all kinds of like mental development stories from that movie. Like apparently I think Tim Burton was like I think that was like one
Oh
of the first
yeah, he was like somehow involved, wasn't he? I remember reading about that.
rubbed off on him a bit, didn't it?
Yeah.
Skeletons. That's I'm gonna make a career out of those.
He's like, do you know what? Those are never mind Gargi. Those are the best bit of this movie.
Yeah, building on that.
But no, yeah, I think it's definitely not one of Disney's strongest, and definitely not one of the strongest movies from my childhood anyway. But yeah, moving on to your second one, which is also animation. Again, foreign movie, The Trips of Belleville. So I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are rewatching it.
So yeah, this one was probably the most of an experience rewatching it because, again, I think I'd only seen it the one time. Although it definitely felt like I remembered a lot more of it. But I do only remember. I can only think of watching it the one time, but at the same time, it seemed like the movie actually had left much more of an impression. I don't know if that was just due to like the style or the animation, but I found it quite difficult to watch to begin with. There's something just like, and the movie like totally won me over by the end. Like it's so like sort of colourful and charming in loads of different ways and creative and it's funny how many like sort of stereotypes they throw at you, but at the same time like you're kind of like I know exactly what that's stereotyping, which is really bizarre.
Yeah,
it's done really well. But yeah, like at the beginning, I mean, there's something quite melancholic about the sort of, especially like I mean, I guess to begin with, it's like this old woman and her grandson, I think he is, and it's it's really sort of sweet, their sort of dynamic, and she obviously really cares for him, wants to like sort of make him happy and everything, and then it just like cuts forward and he's just like really skinny and like he just suddenly
got
just
those big
doesn't
buff
ever have.
cycler's thighs. Thought that was really funny.
Like was she like vacuum cleans, and he's just always like struggling to exist. He's just always like it just always looks like he's on the verge of like putting the barrel of a gun in his mouth, or just like outright collapsing forever. And it obviously like raining, and you just have this like miserable sort of like and then he goes home and he's just like collapsing on the table.
and then he has to get up and eat this like green sludge, and
Yeah, it looked like
I
it
was
was like
just-
fish heads and stuff in it. Like,
exactly, and it was and I was just like, so all the beginning when it is quite bleak, I definitely found, and I think I really like responded to that as a kid. Like, I think it really kind of like made me uncomfortable. I think I just wasn't. I think I mentioned this in the first part of the video, where I think I just kind of wasn't really ready for like I guess that it feels in a lot of ways like quite an honest and quite a real sort of like depiction, despite it being an animation. Whereas I was very much a kid and looking for, you know, like hyper real and sort of nice and or everyone talks in a really high pitched voice and everything's sort of colourful. Whereas this was just like so much the opposite.
Especially there's
like,
some points in this that are really like dark.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
even just little snippets that are really scary, like when like the other two cyclists, just their faces. And do you know what it reminded me of? Actually, it really reminded me of Sorry to Bother You, because they kind of had this like horse like look, and they were like panting and.
Well, they had like harsh noises, didn't they? Whenever that's a really good point. Actually, there definitely was like echoes of Sorry to Bother You. Not that obviously it might have, the inspiration might have come the other way around, if there is any connection at all. But yeah, it's just a really good point. But yeah, it just that and he never really seems to, even by the end, he just doesn't really seem. I don't think he's ever happy.
Yeah, he wasn't even phased at all. Like, he was phased by nothing. Like, when they were managing to like get away, and it was just him and the triplets and his grandma or whatever. He was just pedaling along like nothing was happening.
Yeah, he looked as involved in that as he looked in everything else. Even when he was, I love that even like when they kidnap him, he just kind of looks in the van and he's like, okay.
He's just kind of like.
Yeah, he's just like, fine. It's like this. I'm not going to be no more or no less comfortable than I have been, basically. But yeah, the movie was fairly bonkers. But I actually like really did appreciate a lot of it. You know, there was like so much sort of creativity. I do remember like the sort of triplets, and I love the one that went like fishing for frogs. And just like throws a grenade, and there's so much like sort of style to the movie, and then even just like the running gag of them just eat all the different ways that they eat frog. Like my favourite ones when they're just like the lollipops.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, and the grand's just kind of sitting there like, what is going on?
And and they're all burnt as well. I really loved the bit as well where they're at the triplets' house, and the grand's like, she's just had enough of the frogs, so she goes like put her frog leftovers in like the fridge. And then one of the triplets like grabs her and it's just like, no, and starts polishing the fridge. And it's so good as well, because another thing that I really appreciated about it is the movie has like next to no dialogue, and actually what like dialogue there isn't even really that relevant. Like, you have like a lot of like, there's maybe like dialogue from the TV or dialogue from like when they're sort of having like the sort of Grand Prix type thing, and there's like the announcers speaking is kind of like the most vocalization you get, and it's not even really it's like none of the characters that are speaking. So the movie does a lot just like of visual storytelling, which is impressive. Shame about the racist cartoon at the beginning though.
Yeah, that was a bit much. I thought it was funny as well that there was. I thought it was funny that there was like the kind of like anti-Disney or like kind of Disney digs. I thought that was funny as well. I really liked it, actually. I really liked it. I thought it felt very, very French, but I do enjoy French. I do enjoy French films. I think there's like a definite like feel and look to them, and this one was like drowning in it.
Yes, absolutely. Best way to put it.
Yeah, but I thought it was really fun. I do get what you mean. Like, it was difficult to watch, and that was mainly because of the main character, and just it was a weird one, but I did really enjoy it. When even like as I was watching it, I was like, oh God, this is weird. And then like I was talking about it, and people were like, oh, what was that about? And I was like, well, this guy, he's doing the Tour de France, and then he gets kidnapped, and then there's these three triplets, and they're eating frogs, and
I as well, like because obviously they show you the kidnapping, and I could remember like those sort of guys in suits as I was watching it, and I remember him like sort of being somewhere.
They were really funny with those crazy big squares.
Yeah, and there's some I really like the shot where they get in the car and there's two of them, and it's just literally just the same shot mirrored, where they both like pull up their cigarettes and light it. Yeah, they were really funny, and it was because they always seem to show them from like different angles as well, but they are literally just like they're really like thin but really tall and square.
Yeah, but their head's like here, and then the top of their body's like here. It was funny, very funny.
It's brilliant. But yeah, I kind of thought, because I was watching it and I was like, oh yeah, I remember them peddling, and I was trying to think, I was like, what is it they're actually doing with the peddling? And I remember the building that they're all in is like wine bottles and stuff in it, so I was like, are they producing like wine or something? I was like, what is it that the whole scheme is? They like powdering something? But I love that what they've kidnapped them for is they're just doing like an underground Grand Prix where they're just like artificially cycling, and they just have like fake like the wee things like moving depending on like who's faster. That's so nuts that's just they've gone to so much effort to just have like a fake race.
Yeah,
like
that's a good
is
point.
mad for.
But no, I think overall I did actually really enjoy it. So thanks. So thank you.
Anytime. I'll bring more nightmares from my past.
Thank you. It was very nightmare inducing. But there's another movie which is nightmare inducing, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first, my favourite of my original choices, of course, Benji the Hunted. I think it's funny, and I don't know whether it is just mostly nostalgia or not, but I do still get that lovely, like, heartwarming feeling when I watched it. But it was very funny. Like, I could barely remember a thing, but some of the things I did remember, I remembered so vividly. Like the point where the cougar or mountain lion or whatever it is gets shot, and like Benji goes over and he's investigating. I remember that bit so vividly. But that's about it. And Sorry,
I was going to say I do have to say I feel really bad, but when that scene happened, just because of the way it's framed and like the sort of like wholesome innocence of the music in the movie up to that point, I did genuinely laugh, just because it's so like unexpectedly brutal so early on into the movie as well.
I did that kind of like children's movie thing where it showed you like what essentially just looked like a scrape, but that seemed to be a fatal wound.
Yeah, also like mad props to, because I saw in like the opening credits it mentioned like cougar handlers, and I was like, that's interesting. And then obviously as soon as the cougar turned up, I was like, okay, that's why they've got it. But there's, what is it when it's lying on the ground and Benji's like got it by the ear and
and he's like tugging at it.
How did they get that filmed? Like, did they go through like 16 dogs or something? Like, that's mental.
Benji's
the
a
cougar's
professional.
just chill.
What can I say? I was honestly like, the cougar as well, yep, in fairness. I bet he was drugged up to his eyeballs. That's
a fair point, actually.
I remember like reading about the movie obviously once I'd watched it, and they were talking about Benji, the dog, who I think was a girl called, like, I can't remember. Anyway, but that dog was like an actual legit star, like in hundreds of its own movies. Like There's like a whole span of Benji movies.
Amazing. And is that the only one you've seen?
That's the only one I've seen, yeah. But sadly enough, Benji the Hunted wasn't rated very highly in comparison to the other Benji movies. So I'm definitely gonna have to check them out now.
You're going on the Benji binge?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I wonder if they're all in Disney Plus. Who knows?
The Benji collection. If not, just buy like the 4K box set, which I'm sure they've done.
Yeah, it'll be like £6 or something.
Or the original prints.
Yes.
And, have your own private screening.
That'd be amazing. I think another thing that was so funny about it, I didn't have any memory of the music, which was a big part of the movie.
The music does a lot.
It was very, like, it felt very, like, royalty-free music.
That's such a good way of putting it.
Like, someone who's maybe not as experienced was watching it and was like, yeah, that'll be fine. Or they were hearing it like a tune in the lift or something, and they were like, oh yeah, this would be great during the scene when he's running away from blah blah blah. But yeah, I thought it was very funny. I thought it was quite distracting at times. Another thing that I thought was really funny that I misremembered or just didn't remember at all was the straight up wolf murder.
Oh,
by Benji.
That bit also really got me. I had to rewind that a few times because again, it's so out of left field just how quickly again there's like no setup to like the cliff being there, and it's like Benji just like immediately stops at this bush, and oh my god, just the visual of that thing.
Because you see the wolf, and he's like twisting and writhing in midair.
It's a proper, like, he soars off it as well. It's not even just like, it's not like a sort of like, oh, he like turns and tries to like scramble or something. He just outright is catapulted off that cliff.
Yeah, that looks like some kind of, I think it was a dog actually, but some kind of dog wrangler has just chucked this poor thing, and someone's been filming it.
Yeah, with a really big net at the bottom. You like to hope.
I liked it as well because it like cut back to Benji, and Benji was like standing at the top of the cliff like, yeah.
Yeah, that'll teach you.
Exactly. Like, that's super dark. I wonder if as a child you realised you must have done that the wolf. I mean, we've all seen The Lion King, so we know what happens when you fall off a cliff. So
yeah, I know. Did you suppress that?
I must have done. Oh, very funny. The last thing I wanted to mention as well is the zooms. And they were hilariously frequent, to the point where even if the shot was held for a second, I was like, oh, are they going to zoom in? And then they did.
They always find room for a zoom.
Yeah, I just thought it was very funny. I don't know, I just felt very like amateurish, but at the same time they such like the animals were like stars, so they must have had some kind of budget to be able to hire people to control all the animals.
Thanks for that. Obviously, all the shoddier. I mean, to be fair, they probably saved a bomb on the script. I think
Fair.
I have a feeling that it mentions that because I think, again, I kind of looking at the credits, I have a feeling that the writer and director and I think producer also might have done the music, or at least some of the music, which would explain.
That would explain, yeah.
I mean, he didn't obviously have to put much work into the script. But yeah, I think one of my favourite bits was it's just like, I think it's the second time where the old man turns up in the helicopter, and I was like, who is funding this? Like,
do you know what? I read the old man was like the actual dog's owner.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, was that like a stipulation? He was like, well, if the dog's going to be in the movie, so am I.
But the whole, that was, to me, the most ridiculous part of it was the fact that, the idea that, like, because obviously at the start he's like, what is it, I was on a boat, and then Benji was like washed away, and he's like, we need to find Benji. Like, if you actually went to like the Coast Guard or the police or whatever, and you were like, oh yeah, I was on a boat and my dog washed away, there's no way they're like, cool,
no.
Our choppers are at your disposal, like we will run you to this island as many times as you need. They'll be like, A, your dog's dead, and B, that's on you. Why did you take him on a boat, and why did you make no effort to
in the
secure
middle
him
of a storm?
There's storm warning. Like, you must have known that thing was coming. Like, what were you doing out there anyway? What did you need him for on the high seas?
I love to think, can you imagine how many people were lost in those woods? Like, those were pretty big woods. How many people were lost, and they're like, sorry, no choppers available.
Exactly, because they take him there twice. In the same woods. He's like, no, we need to go back. He's like, we might have missed him.
And he just gets out and he kind of stands there, doesn't he? And then immediately just gets back in.
Yeah. He wasn't here when we landed in the first few seconds, so
yeah. A small dog definitely isn't going to be terrified of the sound of a helicopter, so he's probably not run away.
Especially after his experience on a boat. Like.
Exactly. After I almost drowned him, taking him to sea.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, it was a fun ride.
It was genuinely a fun ride. I got to say, it was a very wholesome time.
Yeah, it was very wholesome. It was some good times. Speaking of wild rides as well, Sam, moving on to your last choice, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, and I think the title, if anything, just perfectly encapsulates the movie. And how bizarre it is.
It does that, doesn't it? Because you're like, what movie? And then I think I'm now so used to like movies having strange titles that movies themselves not really being that weird. But this is definitely a case of that's a weird title, and it just gets weirder from there.
Yeah, the weirdest part about the title is that it makes sense. There's
actually like a cohesive reason for it. Well, like one thing that I had no memory of, which I guess kind of makes sense. I might not have even really been aware of it, but is like so obvious when you're actually watching the film. Is that the movie was written by Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, I saw that like in the opening credits.
Yeah, same. And I was like, that. As soon as I saw his name, I was like, that was A, surprising, and B, really logical. Actually, how insane this movie is. And then when you just, the more like the further into it goes, and the more of the design you see, the more I was like, yeah, this is literally just like a live action Dr. Seuss book in a lot of ways. But it is. Yeah, like I think I said, I remembered like the most. Oh, this is the one I remembered the most. And I think it was the one that I rewatched. I do remember rewatching this a lot, or a fair amount at least. This is another one. It really surprised me, given how like creative the movie is in a lot of ways. It really surprised me how much it kind of bored me at points.
Fair.
I was like, it's really weird how this movie just sort of jumps between like being really imaginative and really out there, and you don't know what, it turns a corner and it could literally go anywhere. There's like chase scenes that literally just lead to nowhere and make no sense and are just in it. But it's at the same time, the movie has about 3 seconds of plot. Which was an achievement in itself, and it just, I also did find it quite amusing how many excuses the movie makes to get the characters to just go between like the same locations over and over again. Like it's just like so much of the movie is like Bart going, like he's in like the room where his mum's kept, and then he run down
to like the little sink boilery room place.
Yeah. and then like a scene later he's back up there for like a scene, true. And then he goes back down. And I'm like, they're really proud of this set. Like they're like, you know
those
what?
sets look expensive. In fairness, that's probably why they could only build like 3.
Yeah, and I watched this movie in like bits, and was making dinner at one point while I had it on my laptop, and I was down in the kitchen, and one of my flatmates just came in and they started talking to me, and I had the movie paused, and I was like, they asked what I was watching, and I was like, oh, it's a really weird movie, like I'll show you, and I hit play. I genuinely, the minute of the movie that I showed them was just the plumber, was it Mr. Zabludowski, and he does a bit where I think he's just left the set that they always use where the mother's kept. He's got the cigar and he's just kind of walking along.
Oh yeah.
And genuinely, like that 1 minute of like movie, he is just like surrounded by like plain white walls, and he's just walking along like normal ground. And I was like, okay, I swear, outside of this minute of the movie, it's really, really weird. But this 60 seconds of the movie, there seems to be like no style to it whatsoever, and it's really unfortunate that I've just hyped this up and shown you this one bit of it.
That's so funny, because I was watching it and Ryan was there, and he was like, what are you watching? And I was telling him, and he was like, is this a movie Sam watched when he was young? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay. So take from that what you will.
Fair enough.
Do you know what though? Embarrassingly enough, actually, once you kind of got into it and accepted it for what it was, I kind of enjoyed it. I'm not even gonna lie.
There definitely are like points in it where I was having a really good time. I don't know why, but I think my favourite bit of the movie was sort of coming up towards the end when and that's actually another thing I was going to mention. I've asked this before. You've not seen Red Dwarf, have you? The TV show. No, so there's a character in Red Dwarf, and I'm really surprised that I never got this when I watched Red Dwarf for like the first time. But one of the main like characters in it is called Arnold Rimmer, and he looks and acts so much like Dr. Twilliger. It is really, really like to the point where I looked up afterwards to see if there was like an interview or something where he acknowledged this, because I was like, there's no way he hasn't seen this and consciously base like some of his performance on it, because it's so weirdly similar that was just throwing me for the whole movie. But yeah, the bit I just like really enjoyed was when he's like captured Bart and Mr. Zabludowski, and the names in this movie. I know. And yet the protagonist is just called Bart. And they're in like the lift, and the guy operating the lift is
what was he all about?
I know. He's just like really tanned and oiled, and has like a lampshade on his head, and just the most intense.
And he had like obviously like the painted black circles around his eyes.
And then it's the fact that he's like taking them down and just for no reason is singing the descent and what every floor entails. And it's the fact that like they're obviously not in a lift, they just have the walls of the set like wobbling,
Yep.
and they just kind of like sway, and Terwilliger the whole time is just looking as dignified and like it's like stoic as he can. And I just honestly I was having such a good time with that scene, because I was like, the movie is almost like splitting at the seams here. Like I mean, there's not really much of an attempt at realism, but this is literally just like watching a stage play. But
Yeah,
they're taking
you could all but see the guys behind the sets just pushing it.
literally. And yeah, that honestly, like, I just had it's such a short bit as well, but I just had such a good time with it. And it was
I distinctly remember that bit. I was watching it and I was like, what is this? What's happening?
And it ends so quickly as well. It's over, because they only go down, like, again, all the structures in this movie are like so like big and elongated, and there's only like 3 floors in the whole building that he takes them down. Which it was nuts. But yeah, there was a lot of like songs there were lines and moments where I was like hit with just like waves of nostalgia. Yeah. As soon as they said like practice makes perfect, I was almost like getting PTSD, because I was like, I remember that being said a lot in this movie.
No, that's funny. I think it definitely had that nice like old musical feel at times.
Yeah.
Which is always fun. Like, I do love a big like song and dance number. And especially that really weird one with all like the other non-pianists. That was that was weird, but it was a ride. Yeah, it goes on for ages.
It comes out of nowhere, and even like I love that even like the conclusion of it, they're all just kind of like, oh, that was a bit weird, and just kind of walk away. And even the movie just kind of like moves on from it, as if like, because they don't even come back. Like, I kind of thought when they were trying to figure out like what they were gonna do to stop like Dr. T, I thought maybe they would like have a payoff to that, but no. And they're painted green for some reason as well. The people.
The whole thing. That was very weird. I do remember it going on for a very long time.
Yeah, and I was having fun with it, but at the same time, it was almost like the music would sort of hit a crescendo, and you'd be like, oh, okay. And then okay, there's more.
Yeah. 100%.
Which actually kind of is the movie as a whole, really. You just kind of, every scene almost seems like it's running out of plot, and then it just takes like the weird, it's not even like it takes a left turn when you expect it to take a right turn. It's like does a cartwheel backwards when you think it's
like
moving
the whole,
to the right.
Like the solution to the problem, that's weird, like, oh, we'll just make this magic potion and it'll take away sound. Like, what? That didn't even like who came up with that?
I know, and yeah, there's so much of that, isn't it? Where it's just like, and obviously I remembered that it was a dream, but I didn't realise that the movie was upfront about that. And to be fair, I think I watched this on VHS. I think I might mention this in the first part, where I think I had like, my mum had recorded it off the TV, and I think for ages it just didn't have the recording, just didn't have the beginning of the movie. So I think I always just of had seen it from a certain point, and I think the certain point was not long after the dream had started. So I think for ages I did think that was something that was revealed, and then obviously after eventually, I don't know if it was just on TV again or what, but eventually I saw like the opening of the movie, and it breaks the third wall or the fourth wall, and but yeah, I guess a lot of the movie does kind of get away with the fact that it does tell you that it is all in the sort of sleep state of a kid's mind. But yeah, like again, like you mentioned, like the room with, it's just like Zeblodowski's just in it with like hundreds of sinks, because it's like that's his idea of what a plumber is. He just literally just is in a room full of sinks.
That's that's very funny.
And I also just enjoyed that. What is it? As soon as Zeblodowski agrees to help him, he just starts calling him Dad, and because like that's how it works. Is like
I'm like, oh dear.
You've agreed to, but also because Zeblodowski fancies the mum, he's just like, fine. He's so happy to just go along for the ride.
And he starts referring to her as his wife and everything, doesn't he?
And she's just kind of like, okay, I guess I've been hypnotised for a while, so maybe.
Yeah, she's such a weird character. She's just like so, like, yeah, that's fine. Do you know what I mean?
She is. The movie is full of weird characters. I remember obviously the twins that were in it. I remember being a bit more like creeped out by them as a kid.
Yeah, they were a bit creepy.
And even like I think I remember actually being quite like, something really freaked me out with the fact that he just cuts their beard and they die. Like There was
Yeah, that
something
was
about
grim.
that.
That was grim.
Yeah, like just straight up, and then Dr. T mourns them at one point, and is is ridiculously over the top fashion. I was again looking online. There's not really tons about this movie. Joe Dante, who I think directed Gremlins, and I think a few other films, has like a brief. There's like a brief thing on YouTube where he like introduces I think a trailer to the movie. And just slags it off because he talks about the movie. I think the movie was like getting re-released and has like found a cult following, and I think the whole video was just him going, "Why?"
Yeah.
And it's weird how like polarizing the film is because I found like a bunch of stuff online that is really like loving it and how stylistic it is and all the sort of like imaginative stuff in it. And I found some stuff talking about how I really wanted to find like an in-depth thing on this because I really wanted to read people's thoughts on this, but I found a lot of people saying how the movie is like really sinister and really dark, and how there's a lot of like homophobic and anti-communist like propaganda in there. And I'm like, I'm sure you can draw those like connections, but at the same time, like, yeah, I'd like to read that deep dive because I wasn't getting that impression so much. Like,
no, I can't say I was either, to be honest.
Like, that felt like. I mean, you could argue. Obviously, we did a podcast on like basic and codes, and the villain is like arguably like quite camp and stuff like that. But
yeah, and I'd say anything like, if anything, the whole scene, the massive big long scene we were talking about was like super homoerotic. If anything,
was
just these like
absolutely
the muscly half naked green men.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, okay, he locks them up, but the movie doesn't condone that. Like,
Yeah.
I found that really, I found that sort of reading of it really strange. Now, again, I just didn't. If that's there, then I didn't feel like I was hit with it, and especially from a movie from the 50s, like I'm pretty sure if I had that intention, it probably could have been a lot more direct about it.
Yeah, there are movies from the 50s that are definitely a bit more problematic.
Exactly. And I think actually one thing. You could literally talk forever about this movie. There's just so many because it's so like disjointedly weird. It doesn't even like the weirdness, as you mentioned, it just comes out of nowhere and then disappears like the next scene. But the guard that like sort of is like guarding them when they're in like the dungeon towards the end again. When he first appeared, and he had this thing. You find out it's his hearing aids, but when he first appeared, I was like, are those headphones?
Yeah, that's what I was like, does he have like a Walkman or something? Yeah,
but then it looks like he had an iPod. But then I was like, this movie literally came out like it's not like it's styled in the 50s. It literally came out in the 50s. So then I was really hung up on that for a while, where I was like, what is going on here? Because like, there's no way he has an iPod. There's no way that no one at the time knew what an iPod was. So what is that supposed to be? And obviously the movie's all about music, so it made sense for it to be some kind of like music device. But then they just mentioned it being a hearing aid, and I was like, okay, that kind of clears it up. But it is weird just how much it just looked like he had like a headphone in.
Yeah, because that's funny because when Bart mentioned about the hearing aid, I was like, what? And then he pulled the thing off, and I was like, oh right, okay.
Exactly. Kind of cruel of them to do that, but whatever.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they just didn't. Yeah, he was a bit selfish. But I suppose they were locked in a cage, so.
Yeah, true. With a big bone.
That's true. In a bucket. That must have been to pee in. How weird! I've only just realised that.
Yeah, I didn't really factor that one.
No. How funny. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Now we've saved the best till last, as I'm sure you'll agree, Sam. And that is, of course, my final choice, which was the movie Water Babies. And I can now fully understand why my mum and my gran never wanted me to watch it. Because it's trash. And not only is it trash, it has a terrible story. It has terrible actors and nightmare-inducing animation. So it's just the whole package was awful.
The animation that moves at like 12 frames a second or something.
It was grim. The whole thing. And I realised that my recollections of it weren't even accurate. in my memory, like I said, they were like going through this this little river thing, and that's when they turned into the water babies. But no, he just jumped in a river and that was him. And I don't know where I got any of my info from. I've obviously just repressed it. But saying that, the minute they started singing, I was like, oh no. Kind of like your PTSD thing where I was like, oh, I remember this.
Oh yeah, that.
So yeah, I'm assuming you really enjoyed it.
I had an absolute by far my favourite film. Tears at the end.
Oh, of course.
And I've already started a petition for Water Babies too.
We need the same kind of animation though. No, we don't need any kind of increased
budget
can't
upscale
or no.
The movie really was proud of that song, wasn't it?
Wow.
Like, yeah, my God, that movie.
Do you know what's funny as well? I really remember the weird witch woman. Like the one that was always like staring at him, and then they would play that like note of
yeah.
I remember that just as I was watching it the first time you see her and she's like an old woman and she fell, and I was like, oh no, it's her. And then you see her as like the maid. Oh,
again, that was another thing that the movie was like very proud of, wasn't it? By the end, but it was like and now we'll reveal this connection.
Yeah, we'll shove it down your throat in case you hadn't already connected it.
I did actually find that really funny because we were talking recently about The Shining and how I think I mentioned that in a lesser film they would have like a really obvious montage of all those moments, and then the movie had that as if it was reacting.
Oh God, it was Sorry, carry on.
No, it's your film. I want to hear your thoughts.
I couldn't even tell you what any more of my thoughts were because I was just. One of my notes says here that there was like 50 different subplots, but at the same time, nothing was happening.
That's probably the best analysis of Water Babies that anyone has ever written, to be honest.
Yeah. Much like Black Cauldron, but Black Cauldron was still better than this. So, if you're going to watch one of the two, make a Black Cauldron.
I think the movie's got me as well because in the opening credits there was quite a few names that had me excited. You know, there's Bernard Cribbins and John Pertwee and Una Stubbs had unfortunately passed away recently, and I was like, oh, this, you know, it'd be really nice to watch a movie with these actors in it that I know. And
no.
I was wrong. I've got to ask, at what point for you did it? Because obviously you were going in with a fair amount of nostalgia. At what point did you go, oh no?
The minute it started to look like a pantomime, which was 30 seconds in, when they had that like London set and that horrible little boy with his horrible accent.
And yeah, there's a real, like, the movie really leans into the Cockney as well. To the point where like part of me was like part of me was like I should translate what they're saying, but also don't want or need to know what they're saying.
Yep. But and then I just there was nothing like redeeming about it. There wasn't a single point when I was like, oh yeah, that was a nice memory. I remember that. I was watching and I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, very much. I know. I think I was kind of like as well, like hoping at points when it became animated. I was like, okay, maybe now the movie will kind of like pick up a little bit, maybe like find its footing, and it just really doesn't.
It doesn't ever at all.
And I think it's funny when you were talking about like your memory seemed to do more work than the movie does, and obviously like explaining the water babies and that whole like animated, the whole reason, because again there's like, you would think with a movie being animated it was maybe like, okay, well they're gonna have, you know, they obviously want to do an animated film, but maybe they want to do some like setup beforehand and maybe like mix like have like a narrative reason for there suddenly being like an animated segment. But it's weird how like much setup the movie has, and then pretty much just like it's just like, okay, and now we're a different film.
Yes. It's funny as
Then
well because you think about movies like even like Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I haven't seen it in ages, but there is kind of it makes sense that it goes into kind of animation, and it's funny because I'm
Mary
sure
Poppins.
the Mary Poppins does it amazingly, and the guy who's in Water Babies is in both of those movies. He plays Mr. Banks. He was the dad of the kind of posh dad who owned the big manor house.
Oh, that's where I recognised him from.
Yeah, he was Mr. Banks, and he was also in Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
That is it. Yeah, I'm same as you. I've not seen those movies in forever. That makes a lot of sense. Because when he turned up, I was like, I'm recognising this guy, and I don't know where from.
Yeah. But those are two significantly better movies than Water Babies. I wonder if he hit it big. He hit it big with Mary Poppins. Was like, yes, this is amazing. Bedknobs and Broomsticks, I think, did all right, and then it was like, do you know what? This has worked for me before. And then it didn't, and we never saw him in anything after that.
Yeah, that's it. Career suicide. That shotgun he was wielding went straight to his career. There was just so much like strangeness to. Yeah, as you mentioned, it does have very much like a pantomime sort of look, and the house that they're filming in, it just looks like the sort of house that you could go visit, and they would have like ropes and poles up, and the house just always looks like that, and it looks like they've just like quickly brushed the ropes and poles away, filmed everything they needed to film, and then just got out of there. Like, it doesn't look like
100%.
that stuff exists for the movie at all. It doesn't feel like those characters belong there, and I think one of my favourite bits was again, like, just the movie. It's just, again, these movies, obviously, you can tell the people making them are like, oh, we're making it for kids, so we don't have to think about anything at all. And what is it when the wee kid lands in the girl's bedroom, and she's just like fully dressed and in bed,
lying in her bed.
Yeah, like she's a child. How many?
It's the middle of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. How many children do you know would like? Can you imagine? There's no way there's any child on this earth that in a room that big as well that is just going to spend the day fully dressed, sitting in bed, fully conscious.
I don't even think she had a book or anything. She was just, what was she doing? Just like staring out the window.
Just, meditating, like, and deep in thought, but like, thinking about what? She's a child. That was just, again, another thing that was like, what were the people who made this movie, what were they thinking was going on in that kid's life?
It was so like movie making 101.
Yeah, and then I think there's another scene when obviously that woman who is the witch at the end, and she is in the room with the kid, and I think she's like talking to the kid, so like she knows the kid's there. I think there's a it's not
she's like spurring them on almost.
Yeah, but then after she like says something, the kid's like, the wee girl's got like her back to her, and then the camera like sort of tracks the witch's like POV. As she just goes from like, looking at the kid's back to looking slightly to the right at the kid's reflection, and it does like a sort of zoom in as if it's like a reveal, but there's nothing happens. It literally is she just is suddenly looking at the reflection of the girl that she knew was there, and the girl knows she was there. So there's nothing changes whatsoever. It was a really, really strange choice for them to make in that moment. Like just so inexplicable. It was almost as like they were like, oh, we just need to jazz this up a bit visually.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, like look to the side.
Or someone's been like, when movies like look in the mirror, it always makes it look. I'll think of The Shining.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, yeah, we should do that as well. Maybe our movie will be as good as The Shining. And it was. So it paid off.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the ending as well, where they just like the kids who had previously attempted to was part of like a burglary basically.
Yes.
They're just like
run away into the night.
Yeah, because even that whole bit where like Tom catches them. Is it Tom he's called? Yeah, I mean, my brain's doing its best to forget. Where he obviously like he catches like the guys that he's with, chimney sweeps, whatever they are, and they're like one of them's in the middle of like stealing stuff, and then the guy tries to like frame it on Tom by like throwing the stuff at him, and then there's this really weird moment where obviously like, the witch character's sort of there, and she's fully aware that the guy's trying to frame Tom, but then the guy just kind of shouts like, "Oh, it was him," and everyone just kind of like there, and they don't even.
Is that when they
act
like come up behind her like an army?
Yeah, but they also don't. It's not like they're like, "Oh, we're taking your word for it and we believe you." They kind of act as if we're like, "No, we know that you're lying about this," and then Tom runs away anyway, and that's like the genesis for like the whole. And I was just so confused. I was like, because the movie didn't even seem to believe that Tom was guilty.
Had done it.
Yeah, and Tom for some reason is still running away from the whole situation, and then again that like days later he returns, and even that whole ending sequence went on a lot longer than.
Yeah.
Because again, it's like the movie stops being animated, and then it's suddenly like, oh yeah, now we have to wrap up all the threads that we established in Act One. It was oh, and we can't not mention the accent work that was going on in the movie.
Oh.
In particular, when they met a Scottish character, that was.
Yep. There was a lot of accents. There was a Scottish character. There was that nice French fish or shark, whatever he was, and he was dressed like I liked all the costume work as well. It was really good. It was really. It definitely wasn't stereotyping anything. I feel like the accent was enough to tell us that the lobster was Scottish and the swordfish thing was French. I think we would have got it from the accent alone.
But how will they know?
Exactly. Oh wow. But the "See You, Jimmy" hat, that just the minute I saw it, I was like, he must be a Scottish lobster.
I think it's the fact the accent seemed to slip. I don't know if it was just me, but so it really sounded like the accents. Every single one at some point slipped into a different accent, or a different region at least.
They probably just had like a whole revolving door of actors. And they're like, yeah, just come on in, just do whatever you want.
Just whatever accent you're feeling today. To be honest, just do that.
Yeah, just fine.
We'll make it work. We'll fix it in post. This bit's gonna be animated anyway. Like, doesn't
yeah,
really
wait till you see the animation.
Yeah,
that'll save it.
Yeah, we have our best one-armed artist on the job. He's unwell at the moment, but he assures us it'll be done by like Christmas or something.
Oh yeah, it was a fun ride, but I do apologise for making you sit through it. Good thing it was only short though.
Yeah, I think part of me was like really having to will myself through it, but then part of me was like, well, I know I've got a lot to say, which I think it's I could only have watched it for this podcast. If I had to watch it in any other circumstance, I physically couldn't have done it. But watching it for the podcast was genuinely like, okay, well, I know that I'm going to get to sit and talk about this, so it is actually in a lot of ways it's going to be worth it, because like there's we've just sat and talked about it for ages. Yeah.
I like that we did. Yeah, we saved the best till last, like the two weirdest ones. So that was fun.
We really did. Like, we started off on like a fairly safe note for both of us with a Disney movie, and sort of Will sort of loved like Italian movie, and then really went down a spiral. Yeah,
I like our completely accidental like structure. Just started at the top and then we just work our way down.
That's very true. Yeah, genuinely no thought into like where this would take us, but yeah, we've ended in a very strange place.
So funny. But no, that was fun. I did enjoy watching your movies. I think it's interesting as well, like, because both of us have watched these movies when we were young. Like, it's just funny, interesting to see.
It is, isn't it? It's so interesting watching a movie that you know someone else is like are going to have like a degree of nostalgia for, but watching it with just none of that. Is really bizarre, because you're watching these movies in a sort of context that they're just never meant to be watched, really. Like, they're basically aimed at kids, or if you're lucky to a degree, like parents. But with a lot of these, it was just like, like watching Benji. It's just like, I was like, I am so not demographic for this movie.
Like, you were kind of like annoyed that it would maybe mess up like what you'd been watching on Disney Plus and start suggesting other things.
Yeah, exactly. Now Disney Plus is going to be throwing some bizarre things at me.
Yeah. But no, thank you very much for that. That's a good place as any to wrap up. So thank you again, Sam. Obviously next time will be your podcast. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, podcast. It'll be podcast number 17 as well.
I know.
Exciting
They
time.
grow up so fast.
Exactly. But yeah, no, thank you again, Sam. And as always, we shall see you soon.
Thank you. That was an interesting deep dive into both our psyches.
A good time.
So thank you. And,
No worries.
yeah. See you next time.
See ya.